First, anything town government can do about communication is no substitute for qualified, independent journalism, and I hope we can find a way to bring that back to Easton in some form. I have contacted the journalism department at Sacred Heart University to name one possibility and look forward to hearing back from them. Open communication is something we already need more of, and the challenge will only be greater now. I would like to see the Board of Selectmen meetings where actual discussion is permitted, even encouraged between the board and citizens. Not long ago at a board meeting, during public comment, several people spoke at length about the baseball field at South Park. Only after all that public comment did Adam Dunsby announce that the decision to not move forward with the baseball field had already taken place. What kind of formality stops us from being practical and reasonable and sharing relevant information? Why allow speaker after speaker to discuss a plan that was already squashed? Obviously, having very clear and user-friendly information on the town website will be more important than ever. We need to consider if legal notices can be website only, but that depends on state law. Easton has an emergency alert system. Perhaps some variation on that can be used to notify people of town meetings. Nobody wants a message for every commission meeting, so some details need to be worked out. For those without home internet access, we could give them the option of getting phone alerts or postcards. For those with internet, as Christy said, the town subscription service is really good. eastonconnecticut.gov/subscribe, and you can get whichever things are most interest to you.
Okay, we're going to go back.
Okay, Christy. So we can go first.
What was that?
No,
Is
we
that
have,
same-
we have a response round. Right?
Response round.
1 minute.
To respond to a couple of things that were said in regard to the postcards, those were discontinued 3 years ago prior to my being on the board. But my understanding is that the result of those postcards, attendance at town meetings did not decrease, did not change from whether they were sent or whether they were not sent. There is an effort to reach out to the seniors, to reach those people that are not tuned in digitally. Signs are placed around town to notify people of what is going on. Notifications are posted in the senior center as well as town hall. So it is not simply relying on a digital medium in order to communicate. I think it takes both parties in order to have their communication. You can communicate as much as you want, but the people on the other side need to actually want to hear that communication as well. And I think reaching people and giving them as many options. On another note, I am personally accessible. Email, phone calls, I respond. And that is something that I think is important as well of our elected officials, to have that personal communication with anybody and everybody who seeks it.
I think everybody has given some good answers as far as what we need to do to improve our communication, and I hope that one of the newspapers does take us maybe under their wing. Maybe something like the Connecticut Post. Ira said he reached out to the Sacred Heart. Somewhere we need to have some news space in the newspaper and online.
I don't have a lot to add. As far as lower attendance, that is getting rid of the postcards and the attendance not really changing, that may be true from a few observations, but there's still something about just having the right, or having the opportunity to get that information. So I do think whether it's postcards or being able to opt in or so on is still worth considering. And we'll have to, as we said in the post-courier world, until we have something to replace it, I think we need to be open-minded about different options.
Okay, thank you. We will start with Ann this time. And we'll just keep rotating the way we've rotated. I couldn't keep track of all the different permutations. So, what should the town do with the South Park property that it currently owns?
Whatever we do with the South Park property, the citizens of Easton should make the determination. I'm the only candidate for selectman who voted to allow the Easton citizens to determine the future of our town-owned property at the September 24th town meeting. This land was purchased with taxpayer money. The referendum for South Park in 2008 specifically stated that it was for the purpose of conservation, preservation, and land control. So it should go back to the taxpayers. Thank you.
The future of South Park is a significant decision, and any proposal should be approved by a town-wide machine vote. Most decisions don't need that, but South Park is an exception. The Board of Selectmen would still have responsibility to decide which proposals to consider and bring forward, so they're not off the hook. I think there are people in town who want to preserve every piece of open land that they can, and others who want to turn every open parcel into a revenue stream. I'm not an absolutist on this. I am not committed to preserving South Park as open land no matter what, and I'm not committed to developing it no matter what. If there's a financially beneficial plan that's bad for the environment or town character, I'd be against it. I think we need to consider proposals not abstractly, but based on their details, while being sensitive to different people who have different goals and preferences. Perhaps some compromise is possible, where some of the land becomes a park, some is used for senior housing, to allow Eastonites to more easily downsize while staying in town. All, of course, while providing a land buffer to protect the river. Lastly, South Park should not be decided in isolation. It is one piece of land. We need to look at Easton's longer-term trajectory that reflects the intersection of our spending, our revenue, and our land use. Should other parcels be preserved as well? Nothing's free. We need to understand the consequences of different decisions and figure out which outcome we want to reach as a town.
So the South Park property was purchased through referendum 10 years ago, and it was purchased so that the town could control its future. It was also purchased, and the taxpayers agreed to, that they were going to get that money back. That was the deal. It was purchased to be sold, and the town would recoup that money. I believe that taxpayers, that's what they wanted, that's what should happen. The town should pursue opportunities in order to recoup and recover the money that was spent on that property, because that is what everyone agreed to in the referendum. The initial plan was for the prayer center to have that purchase lease option. The secondary plan was to sell it off as well for development that is consistent with our zoning. And I think that is the key with that property. It needs to be consistent with our zoning, it needs to fit with the town, and it needs to be thoughtfully carried out. I think proposals need to be listened. Over the summer, Sacred Heart came up with a baseball proposal. A lot of people dismissed it on its surface immediately. The Board of Selectmen listened to the proposal, which I think is what we are responsible to do. Figured out that it was not the right way to move forward for that property, and that's where the conversation ended. But I think that is how we need to approach proposals for that property. I do think it needs to be, the money needs to be recovered for the taxpayers, because that is what they voted for. I do agree that it should go to a referendum. It was purchased through a referendum, therefore that's what I think should happen to it as the end result. That's how it should be disposed. It should not be considered in isolation. It should not be considered in one room. The voters should have a say. That is how they bought it. That's how it should be purchased or sold.
I stand on what I remarked.
I do believe when I looked at the documents from the original referendum and what Christy was saying about the prayer center, I know there were memos from the selectman's office at that time referencing the prayer center. So while the language did talk about conservation and preservation of land in the referendum itself, it's not as though that's all there was to it. But it's also true that whatever was decided in 2008, we're here now, right? We're the residents today. And so the balance of what we think is best is up to us. And I don't think we have to